Well, as our kids are getting adjusted, transitioned, and ready to go, you're getting adjusted and ready to go as well. So I want to welcome you here today. Pastor Joey is my name, and it's a privilege to welcome you here to Stones Hill Community Church, as it is every week. Son of Adam, Daughter of Eve is our series, and one of the things that we try to do is go through a book of the Bible together, or chunks of a book of a Bible together. And the current book that we're working through is the book of Genesis. And Genesis is a book that goes back to our beginnings, and our hope is that by going back to our beginnings, we can create a brand new ending. And that's the hope. And it's good to know that there's a story behind the story, and the story behind the story is a true story, and the Bible lets us in on that. So I'm in an aggressive effort to grow spiritually, an aggressive 10-week effort to grow spiritually, and a lot of our guys in our church are doing this at this time. So it's a good thing, and I'm not supposed to talk about it, so I'm going to not tell you what it is. I think you probably know. But and one of the assignments we had was to write our wives a letter and actually put a stamp on it and mail it. And I'm a practical guy. You know, I write the letter and I seal it up. And it's like, I'm just right here. I could just set it on the table. I could just, put it in the car. Why waste a perfectly good stamp on this letter? It's going to just get here anyway, right? So, okay, it's like, well, no, that's not the point. The point is, do what they're asking you to do. Obey it, right? So I'm going to obey it. Okay, so I get the prettiest stamp I can find. I put it on the envelope, and I go through Cromwell and drop it in the mailbox. Now listen, I can run to Cromwell and back in less than an hour, right? And I love the Postal Service. It does a great service, but it took 2 days for that letter to get from a drop box in Cromwell, less than maybe 3 or 4 miles through the country back to my mailbox, all right? 2 days. 2 days. It's like I can run them back to Cromwell and back probably less than an hour. So anyway, but that was the stamp's beside the point, guys. See, as sons of Adam, we get very practical, don't we? It's like, I don't want to waste a stamp. Well, it wasn't wasting a stamp because I happened to be home when she got the mail and brought it in. And the look on her face when she had a letter, and she knew right away who it was from. And she got that letter, and she loved that letter. And not only that, but she came in from getting the mail the next day, and she was kind of sad looking. It's like, it's not as fun getting the mail today. So, I think the point is, we sons of Adam, sometimes we get practical, don't we? We don't want to waste a stamp. Well, that stamp meant a lot because it kind of came through the normal channels. Like I said, I love the post office. It's awesome. It's amazing, especially with boys in the Army. It's great. You can see them care packages around the world. That's awesome. It took a couple of days, but came just in the right time, just at the right day. It was a blessing. So, sons of Adam, sometimes we get practical. Daughters of Eve, we get too practical maybe for ourselves, don't we? And but it's important, I think, to grow spiritually. So I just want to tell all you guys involved in that journey, persevere, stay with it. A guy by the name of Charles Spurgeon said something many, many years ago. He said, by perseverance, the snail reached the ark. By perseverance, the snail reached the ark. You can just see that little guy, just trying to make his way. He's miles away. Everybody's getting ahead of him. He just keeps after it, keeps after it, and keeps after it. And finally he makes it home. And he gets there, and Noah welcomes him aboard. And he's home, and he's in a place of safety. We're going to be talking about, so you guys persevere, you ladies persevere in your Radiant gathering, all the good things that you do. I've had some of the foods you've made. That's awesome. You guys just persevere, stay faithful. Just do God's work. Put stamps on envelopes. It may not make sense. Just do it. And let God use it. Because He will. He will use it. Praise God. Today we're going to talk about the flood. And it's a very, very important topic. Not just because that's where we are in the book. But it's because there's some very valuable insights, I think, that we gain when we look at something as major, as sobering, as powerful as something that we call a flood. And I learned a long time ago that if I want to be a good communicator, and I do, I want to communicate well with you. I want it to be clear in what I have to say. I want to cover the material. I want to explain it, be faithful to interpret it, carefully and accurately, and illustrate it, apply it, so you can practically live differently as a result of it. That's my goal. That's my vision. So to tell you what I'm going to tell you, then to tell you, and then to tell you what I told you. That's the three things you got to do every week, really, in so many ways. And so if I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you, and just bring it home, right? So what I'm going to talk to you about here, to kind of set this topic up, is that, number one, there's a time and place for judgment and accountability. And we've got to give God the prerogative. He has a right to hold us accountable. And He has a right to do that, especially when violence and the wickedness of the human heart have reached epic proportions, such that, hear me carefully, only one family on the entire globe found grace and mercy and were found to be righteous in the eyes of God. Think about that. That's an astounding statement. And yet, that's exactly the story behind the story. Okay? And so there's a time and place for judgment and accountability. I think we live in a time of this very violent. And just scroll through your social media feeds, and you will see the violence and the wickedness of the human heart, and how that it's out of control in a lot of places in the world. And violence to people, children of various ages, violence to women, violence to those who maybe name the name of Christ. There's a lot of violence and human wickedness in the world. And when you look at that and you realize that was going on continuously, and God has to watch this thing unfold and watch human history go a direction He never intended, until we see, last week we saw the very apex of human wickedness, in that human beings crossed a boundary. Spiritual beings who were fallen crossed a boundary. And therefore, because of this crossing and ignoring of a boundary, something was created that God never intended. And for God to deal with it, and to deal with it in a very thorough manner, even after warning after warning, in fact 120 years, Noah was building the ark. And Peter in the New Testament tells us that Noah was a preacher of righteousness. He proclaimed God's truth. He let the world know, all who would listen, hey, there's a time of accountability coming. Get ready for it. Okay? And so he was a preacher of righteousness. He obeyed God. And he was letting the world know this can't continue. When you've got sons of God cohabiting with daughters of men, daughters of Eve, and this weird offspring of Nephilim are created, where there's this almost a tinkering with the human race. It reaches, violence and wickedness reaches a level where God has to deal with it, and He has to do it in a global fashion. And so as to corrupt the human seed, that's Satan's objective. And he almost succeeds in doing that. And then there was a guy named Noah who found grace in the eyes of the Lord. So there's a time and place for judgment and accountability. Number one, we've got to talk about that. Okay? A lot of cannibalism in the pre-flood world, a lot of animal cruelty, a lot of murder, a lot of bold sexual deviancy involving all ages. Essentially nothing was sacred, and all of God's boundaries were ignored. Okay? All of them, including the spiritual. So this thing reaches an apex. All right? Second thing I want to talk to you about are texts of terror. Okay, and to kind of set up where we need to go when we get to the text, it's text of terror. I want you to understand that a lot of people have seen this global flood idea as a text of terror. That people of all ages, including children, perish, animals perish. I have a very soft and tender place in my heart for animals, and it's hard to think that all the animals of the world would perish, and human little kids would perish. And what we have to keep in mind, though, that even though irresponsible parents place their children in a place of subject them to a drowning, you have to bear in mind that it's not a final word on where those children go. We are not to assume that all children go to hell in that situation. Okay, the fact that their parents put them in a position to drown, that's on them. Okay, it does not imply that children have been lost forever. That God is always a lover of children. He always has been. He always will be. But they look at this text as a text of terror. And I want to challenge it this morning because this is not just a text of terror. And how could God be so violent against so many people on a global epic scale? Doesn't seem right. And I'm going to offer this. A lot of digging to get to this place. But in the ancient Near Eastern mindset, they saw themselves surrounded by a cosmic battle between divine spirit beings and gods, raging monsters and sea creatures. In the ancient Near Eastern mindset, in the pre-flood world, even post-flood, this cosmic sea is like a sinister force in the world. They were surrounded by anti-creational seas. And A&E people, ancient Near Eastern people, believed that these quote-unquote sea monsters had to be defeated in order for creation to take place. And the cosmic and the earthly are intertwined in the ancient Near Eastern worldview. And these biblical remarks and allusions that we find demonstrate the worldview of A&E people of the Old Testament. Ancient Near Eastern people of the Old Testament viewed the cosmos in a certain way. We see these alluded to in the book of Psalms especially. When we read in Psalm 74:19, it was you who split open the sea by your power. You broke the heads of the monsters in the waters. What's that mean? They're reflecting an ancient Near Eastern worldview. We see in Psalm 69:15, do not let the floodwaters engulf me, or the depths swallow me up, or the pit close its mouth over me. What's that mean? In Psalm 104:7, but at your rebuke the waters fled, at the sound of your thunder they took flight. Psalm 29:3, the voice of the Lord is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. The Lord thunders over the mighty waters. Psalm 77:16, the waters saw you, God, the waters saw you and writhed. The very depths were convulsed. What, pray tell, does that mean? You see, the ancient Near Eastern mindset, their worldview, their study of cosmology and the cosmos, it included this understanding that there are sinister spiritual forces that had to be held back in order for Creator God to make something beautiful in this cosmic sea. And He's powerful and He holds them back. This force, and we won't even get into Leviathan in the book of Job, that ancient cosmic sea monster that was tied to some Canaanite deity that threatens all of creation. The earth is surrounded by threatening cosmic forces of destruction, raging waters, cosmic sea creatures, rebel gods. In the A&E worldview, the ancient Near Eastern worldview. And if it helps you deal with this quote-unquote text of terror, this violence, this global flood, could I offer this morning that perhaps God withdraws His protective presence? Humanity didn't want Him butting in anyway. He withdraws His protective presence, and the threatening, sinister cosmic forces have their way, and they're on the planet, working in the planet to rip it apart. The world reverts back into its primal state, floodwaters in the soupy cosmic deep. And this leads me to one of the incredible points that probably we're not going to get through all this morning. We may have a part 2. Okay? But you're with me. I can tell you're tracking it. Okay? And one of the most important points I want you to hear me this morning proclaim, and that is that the flood wasn't just judgment, it was rescue. It was rescue. It wasn't just that everybody else was wiped out. It's that a family was saved. Was rescued out of it. Okay? And so we have to realize that in a pre-flood world, we are so close to losing the truth forever. We are so... Why am I yelling? I guess I get excited. We are so close. I'll tone it down just a little. We are so close to losing the story behind the story. And if you lose the story behind the story, we'll never know the truth. We'll never know it. To think that we came within a hair's whisker, a hair's breadth, a whisker, that close to losing the story. It's overwhelming to think about. And so, do you think, per last week's message, do you think that a world full of demon-inspired Nephilim, do you really think that they would leave one solitary family alone in the world? If they were that aggressive in corrupting human seed, so as to thwart a coming incarnated Messiah who would one day deliver the world and be the new creator of a new creation. Do you think that a family after family of demon-inspired Nephilim, per last week's message, would they leave a single solitary family alone? No, I'm proposing that Noah was saved in the nick of time. They were closing in. You see. They were closing in to destroy the one righteous seed line that was still surviving. The only one family in the world at that time. The unrighteous seed was out to destroy the righteous seed line. And so in the flood, I see God's rescue. Don't just see it as judgment. It's a mistake to do it that way. Especially in the ancient Near Eastern worldview. The cosmic sinister forces and spiritual places and wickedness, and Paul writes about it in Ephesians. And don't underestimate this power, the sinister force in our lives. They bow and cower before Jesus' name. Okay? Don't have to worry there. Oh, so important, though, to recognize we are in a spiritual battle with very sinister, dark forces still at work in the world. And how important it is to be in Christ, full of Christ, in you and before you and behind you and beneath you. To have Christ all around you is so important. And if you need Jesus, open your life up to Him today. But I see the flood as rescue. It's this true story behind the story. And if they didn't survive, truth would be lost forever. And that's why they were in the ark. The ark and the flood is God's commitment to the physical world. He loves this world and the creatures within it. And He cares that we know the truth. And He cares that the one family that followed and loved Him have a safe place to begin again. So don't just see Genesis as judgment. Don't just buy into this text of terror and how could God be so cruel? No, I want you to see it as God who loves so much. He snatches out of a very sinister, wicked-filled world a family because He loves. Okay? So this is not
There's a time and place for judgment and accountability and justice, number one. Number two, text of terror, I challenge it on the basis I've just proposed. Number three, there are flood stories across the cultures of the world, not just in the biblical story of Noah and his family in the flood. There are many cultures who have flood stories. I'm going to address that in just a second. Another point I need to make is that I am a global flood catastrophist. You're a what? A global flood catastrophist. Okay? I'll tell you what that is in just a second. Finally, I'd like to make it to the text. I feel like I've already preached a sermon. But we've got to get to the text. And then, actually, I would like to make an application, both a corporate application to the group, the church, the new ark, God's ark, the church, you're part of it. And then I would like to make an individual application to you personally. Okay, again, I don't know if we'll get it all done here this morning. But we will make some headway. I want to talk to you also about not only that there's a place for judgment, accountability, not only about text of terror, how I challenge that thought, but thirdly, I have to be fair with you and to note that there are many, many flood stories in other cultures of the world. A lot of cultures have flood stories, and these flood traditions vary, but there's also very much agreement in them. In 88% of them, there's a favored family. In 70% of them, there is a survival due to a boat or an ark. In 95% of the flood stories of the cultures of the world, the sole cause of the catastrophe is a flood. In 66%, the disaster is due to man's wickedness. In 67%, animals are also saved as well as humans. In 57% of the flood stories, there are survivors at the end that end up on a mountain somewhere. Some of them saw these floods as divine judgment. What this tells us is that the flood stories of the world come from a common source, but with embellishments. What we have is the true flood story from which all the other cultural embellishment flood stories derive or come from. You see, Genesis is about the story behind the story. See, Genesis 6, 7, 8, 9, true story. The true story behind the story. All the others are embellishments. Okay? And so when we come to the flood story of Genesis, we see some familiar themes. Where these stories predate the biblical flood, we could call them premonitions of what was to come. Where these flood stories from other cultures post-date the biblical flood, we could call them corruptions of the true story behind the story. But the biblical flood story doesn't follow the ancient flood script. And here's what's different. In the ancient flood script, the gods are angry, everybody dies, the gods are finally satisfied, end of story, let's write another book. The true flood story starts like all the others with divine judgment and a flood. But then there's this twist at the end that shatters the paradigm. In the biblical true behind the story, everybody doesn't die like the other flood stories. A family is saved, and then a promise is made to them, and then just to blow the whole pattern and the whole way of understanding other flood stories out of the water, the story in the Bible heads in a different direction altogether, and it involves rainbows and oaths and covenants. No other flood story does that. It blows the categories. What's the point? Well, when this flood story was shared with the world, they stood up and, we've heard that before. Yeah, boats, yeah, family, yeah, animals, yeah, divine wrath, yeah, angry gods, yeah, people destroyed, yeah. What? You said oath and covenant and rainbow? Woo! Now that's a twist. That's how they would have seen it. That's how they would have heard it. And so it's God at work in the flood. We see a God hanging on to humanity. We see a God hanging on to the planet He's made. We see a God that loves the animals He's made. And yet we see a sinister, dark force that's imposed upon a planet and that God holds this planet accountable, and He has every right to do so, but it is not a text of terror, it is a text of rescue. I'm going to tell you something this morning. No matter how dark your life may be, no matter what rogue gene is ravishing your body and going crazy in your cells, no matter what marital situation you feel is totally out of control, no matter what sinister force has attacked and is attacking you or your family or your life or your mind or your heart, God has a plan of rescue. And that plan of rescue involves saying yes to His Son Jesus, who believed in the flood and who asked you to invite Him into your life. Okay? So the flood was universal. And we must understand these points that I have made, or we're going to misread the flood, not understand the flood. And there are flood stories across the cultures of the world, but the Bible's version is the true story of the stories behind the story. And the flood was universal. It impacted an entire planet. I'm going to say it very clearly this morning. The evolutionary proposal is incorrect. Say it again. The evolutionary proposal is incorrect. A third time. The evolutionary proposal is incorrect. It was not a little bit of water and a lot of time. Rather, it was a lot of water and a little bit of time. That's the story behind the story. And all the universities are going to tell you different. But right here, right now, the truth. Not a little bit of water in a long period of time. It's a lot of water. A little bit of time does strange things to the formations of the world, the foundations of the world. It does strange things when you have that amount of water under various states of pressure and tectonic plate shifting, continents coming apart, upheavals, a canopy of water being released on the earth, the streams of the deep being broken and pushing up with power and force. And all that happening in a catastrophic manner. I am a global flood catastrophist. It's over the whole globe, not localized as has been popularized in the last 200 years. Not a local flood, it's a global flood. It's over the whole world. A global flood catastrophist, and it happened in a catastrophic manner. Rocked this world. And so we see this. The crust of the earth buckling under the tremendous pressure. The fractures broke the earth into massive plates again, I say. And when we look at the biblical flood, we see all the water, we see all this changes in topography happening over a 371 day period of time. The flood lasted for 371 days. You can go through and look at the markers and things, and you can see it was a little over a year. And all slightly over a year passed from the time the flood commenced in Genesis 7:11 until the waters had dried up in Genesis 8:14. And even that time frame does not preclude the possibility that the waters may have continued to recede gradually for many more years with corresponding changes in the earth's topography. And what's really interesting, and we see this, if it was a global catastrophic flood, we should see evidence of that, and we do. Scattered throughout the world in various places are large caches of animal bones. And the interesting thing about them is that many are filled with bones of such animals as elephants, rhinoceroses, hippopotamuses, reindeer, horses, pigs, and oxen. Their skeletons are not intact. They have been ripped apart, but the bones are not scattered. They are thrown together in almost unbelievable profusion. It is an interesting feature of such deposits that they usually occur on isolated hills of considerable height. What can account for the collection of so many bones of so many mutually hostile animals in such unlikely environments, if not the worldwide flood of Genesis 6 through 9? Those animals never get together and have a party like that. I don't care how many cartoons we make and watch. They never get together and have a party. They're hostile. And yet they're all together, bones scattered, yes, but all together near a high hill. What are they trying to escape from? How did that happen? Eons ago. You see, the Bible's got it right, and it's been right from day one. And the great day for me will be when the great court of heaven gathers and says, see, we told you so. It's been right there the whole time. One commentator writes, a great flood of water is the only reasonable explanation for this strange phenomena of these bone caches. For what else would have driven these animals together on hilltops and caused them to perish in such numbers except the waters of an engulfing flood? I'm going to say it one more time. The evolutionists have misled you. It is not a little bit of water, a long period of time. It's a lot of water and a little bit of time. Thus saith the Lord. Okay? We have it here. Now listen, we got to get to the text. Yeah. We got some of you are like, man, I've already been to church. Just say the prayer. I'm ready. All right? You ready? Do I need to open up do I need to open up the steps for repentance? Anybody need to repent? All right. The text. Let's look at it quickly. Okay? We'll work through it. All right. Then, you know what? We will go quickly through this. Okay? So stay with me. And I think there's some good application here. We get into this thing. So, Genesis 7, 1 through 24. Then the Lord then said to Noah, go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation. And here's what's crazy about that. Okay? The Lord said, build an ark. 120 years later, does the Bible record any word from God in 120 years? Nope. Isn't that crazy? Noah, you want me to build a what? An ark. It's going to rain. What's rain? Never seen it. Little mist came up from the ground, right? Don't know it. Don't know that world of hydrology. Right? 120 years, God says, build an ark. 120 years, God comes back and says, now, get in. Get in the ark. What would you do in that situation? Well, he got in the ark, all right? So, Noah, go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation. You're the only family that's not been corrupted. Verse 2, take with you 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, and 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate, and also 7 pairs of every kind of bird, a male and female, to keep their various kinds alive throughout the earth. See, animals adapted to environments. I have no problem with adaptation within a species. No problem at all. What did not happen was one species evolving into another species or life form. Total scam. Total scam. Third time. Total scam. Not recorded. Can't be proved. Total theory. Right? Verse 4. 7 days from now I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. And I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made. And Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. Verse 6. Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters came on the earth. And Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives entered the ark to escape the waters of the flood. You got 4 married couples against the sinister forces of the time and the spiritual wickedness in high places. But you got a holy God that's fighting for them, going to rescue them. 4 married couples against the world. Pairs of clean and unclean, verse 8, animals, of birds, and of all creatures that move along the ground, male and female, came to Noah and entered the ark as God had commanded Noah. And after the 7 days, the floodwaters came on the earth in the 600th year of Noah's life. On the 17th day of the 2nd month, on that day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. You got it coming from the bottom, from the top. This is unlike the Mesopotamian flood stories and other cultures. The biblical account sets the events. Listen, they set the events in a historical framework. It's the 17th day of the second month and the 600th year of Noah. No other flood story does that. Why did we do it? Why do we have it here? Because it's history. See how the markers are there, the time markers? Genesis is history. It's the story behind the story. Nobody tells you that. You've known it all along. You've seen it in your little children's Bible story books, and looking and counting the little lambs and the goats and the cow and the eagles and the wrens and the sparrows and the robins getting into the ark, pair by pair. Right? But nobody tells you it really happened. It's not just a cute little nursery story. It is history. History. Okay? And rain fell, verse 12, on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On that very day, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, together with his wife and the wives of his 3 sons, entered the ark. They had with them every wild animal according to its kind, all livestock according to their kinds, every creature that moves along the ground according to its kind, every bird according to its kind. Just put up a picture of the ark real quick. Okay, how do they have room for all of this? It's multi-layered. There's thousands and thousands of little compartments. If you have of the larger animals, if you took baby versions of those, it would give you more room. Okay? Just like some animals hibernate today. If you're in a hibernated state, you wouldn't need as much fuel. Right? So there's a lot of dynamics that are behind this. A lot of creativity that's behind this. But it's doable. It's possible. It's possible. In fact, it happened. I'll say it that way. It happened. Okay, back to verse 15. Pairs of all creatures that have the breath of life in them came to Noah and entered the ark. And the text just keeps reaching back to the first creation language. It just keeps reaching back. God brought the creatures first to Adam, and now He's bringing them to Noah. It just reaches back. God's doing new creation here. He's rescuing from the sinister forces of darkness. He's holding the world accountable, and now He's going to newly create. And He names the animals via Noah. He saves and preserves the animals and the animal world via Adam. He names them. Via Noah, He preserves them. And then via the last Adam, Jesus Christ, He redeems all of creation. Verse 16, the animals going in were male and female of every living thing as God had commanded Noah. Pay attention to this phrase. Then the Lord shut him in. Didn't say the Lord shut everybody else out. He said the Lord shut him in. You're mine. I'm going to protect you. God's not looking to exclude. He's looking to include. But you have a bunch of people who didn't want Him in the world. And so He shuts them in, protecting them. Not shutting everybody else out because He didn't love them. He loves them. But they've turned their back on Him, and it's a high-handed wickedness in the world. And God holds the world accountable, and He has every right and prerogative to do so. Verse 17, for 40 days the flood kept coming on the earth, and as the waters increased, they lifted the ark high above the earth. The waters rose and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. They rose greatly on the earth, and all the high mountains under the entire heavens were covered. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 15 cubits, about 22 feet. Probably could measure the water line on the side of the ark. See how deep that it was submerged in the water. 450 feet long. Memory serves me correctly. 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Okay? 21. Every living thing that moved on land perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarm over the earth, and all mankind, everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. Every living thing on the face of the earth, does that sound like localized flood to you? Was wiped out. people and animals and the creatures that move along the ground, and the birds were wiped from the earth. And what's crazy is animal life is so amazing. And if the spirits of fallen angels had entered and controlled the sons of Adam and the daughters of Eve, all right, what must they have been doing in the animal world? I thought about the time in the Gospels when Jesus cast out demons out of the one guy, and the demons begged to go into the swine that were nearby. And he allowed it, and as soon as they went in, they plunged over the cliff. I actually saw where that happened, Sea of Galilee. They went in. Demons like a host to live in. They like to operate out of a living host, be they animal or human. The text says only Noah was left, and those who with him in the ark. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days. That's the text. And it really happened. I think I've got to run this thing to a quick conclusion. Maybe we'll get through this today. And that is that of all the people in the world, to tell you this truth, Noah would be your man to tell you. And what is that? One person can make a difference. One person can make a difference. One person, in small ways, can make a big difference. And in Noah's case, it meant the saving of the world, the preservation of the story behind the story. In your YouVersion app, I've given you a lot of practical ways, things that you can do. In the Bible YouVersion app, things that you can do, small things that you can do to make a big difference. And we see that. And so you can look at some of those practicals this morning that I would offer to you. But as I think about small ways to make a big difference and how it goes a long way to diffuse something that Charles Colson wrote about years ago in his book, The Body. He said, it's been said that the church is like Noah's Ark. The stench inside would be unbearable if it weren't for the storm outside. He was quoting Niebuhr. So often, the stench is relational, isn't it? For years, as a pastor, I've heard about Christians and non-Christians both. They will complain about the stench in the church. And this is a corporate application of this. The stench in the church and the human side of the divine body of Christ has an underarm, right? And if the church ignores the spiritual deodorant of love and kindness and a Christ-like spirit, the church emits a kind of BO. Nobody likes BO, right? And I think that's what Colson was trying to say in his book, The Body, which is about the church. That the church, the storm on the outside makes the stench on the inside more bearable because it's not good out there. We hear what's going on. It's not good. A lot of water, a lot of storm, a lot of tectonic plate shifting. I mean, it's the foundations of the world being shaken. It's pretty stormy out there. But yet it's kind of smelly in here. But think about that. 8 people, 4 married couples, all the animals. Do you think maybe it got a little... I was mowing the grass yesterday, and I happened to... my dog likes to do number 2 on the grass. And I ran my lawnmower, mowing the grass. Of course, it gets on the mower. I forget to hose it off. I put it in the garage. I shut the garage up. And I come in a little later. And the stench from just one dog in my garage. Like, Joey, you have got to hose that mower off when you get through using it because it's not going to smell good in your garage. Think about that. That's just one animal. All the other animals. So they had a lot of things they had to deal with on the ark. And the stench was one of them. And so Niebuhr and Colson and others have indicated that, the church, it's been said the church is like Noah's Ark. The stench inside would be unbearable if it weren't for the storm outside. And it's a very stormy world when we look at the world. And we think about that, and we think about the spiritual BO that can get into our lives, the sin, the hypocrisy, the gossip, the pride, the worldliness, the lovelessness, the lukewarmness. It all creates a kind of stench. And that stench can permeate into a body of Christ. And when we read the New Testament, almost from the very conception of the church, it struggled, and in one place or another, with everything. They struggle with everything from wrong beliefs to wrong behavior to wrong attitudes to wrong actions. And even in the book of 1 Corinthians, it highlights how strong the stench can become. And we've done a whole study in the book of 1 Corinthians. The stench there wafted from the existence of the factions, the divisions, the cliques, the acceptance of immoral behavior in their lives, even among their very foundational members. The pride, the snobbishness, the my gift is greater than your gift, so I'm a better than you mentality, a lack of love, confusion over marriage and divorce, and even some who denied the resurrection. It was so smelly in Corinth. Stinky problems create a very strong spiritual stench. Stinky problems that are unaddressed, stinky problems that are leaned into, stinky problems that are never confronted. But with God-inspired wisdom, the Apostle Paul addressed their problems, but he never, not once, did he ever hint or suggest that the solution would be to leave the church. He never offers that. Why? Because Paul knew Jesus built the church, purchased her with his blood, loved her, Ephesians 5. He further knew she was the solitary body of Christ, that Jesus is her head, that every Christian is a member of that body, that remaining in the body is indispensable to the spiritual life, and that Jesus is the Savior of that body, Ephesians 5. And of course we know and we see in the world that a storm approaches. And I'm all about navigating the storms of culture. I'm all about living in a culture that has me to believe it's a little bit of water over a long period of time. I'm embedded in that kind of culture. I go to school in that kind of culture. I read books in that kind of culture. I'm embedded in a culture that says a man is not a man, a woman is not a woman, that gender doesn't matter, that biology is bigotry somehow. I live in a culture that's lost its way. And I'm all about navigating and guiding this ship, this ark of Stones Hill Community Church through the cultural quagmire. And that's why I commit to things like the book of Genesis and going back to our beginning so we can create better endings and marry who we need to marry, love who we need to love in a way that it honors God, value the little ones that He brings into our world, letting our sexuality be used and expressed in a way that glorifies Him. I'm all about guiding this ark, this beautiful ark we call Stones Hill Community Church, that's filled with the Spirit, that aspires to be all that God has called her to be. I'm all about guiding this thing as best I can for the glory of God through a storm, a cultural storm that is getting cloudier by the day. If you're going to challenge it, just look at your social media feeds. I saw a 55-year-old woman just walking through a subway station, and a guy walks up and clocks her for no reason at all. She's out cold. It's amazing I can't even watch it anymore. When I was young, maybe 25, it's like, okay, let me see what... It's just hard to see it. It's hard to put up with it. I think that's kind of where God gets to eventually in a pre-flood world. It's the seeing humanity go off the rails. There's a storm, and she approaches. I'm all about guiding the ark through the storm. But I'm also equally all about the sweet aroma of Christ within the ark. And addressing the stench that can often accompany when groups of people are grouped up together. And so many times, I think Colson has it right and Niebuhr has it right. Yet, yes, it's true. The stench on the inside is bearable because of the great storm on the outside, and we'll put up with this, right? We're going to put up with some stench because we know if we step out of this thing, it's not going to be good, and it's true. But Is there stench in your life that you feel the Lord would have you to deal with this morning? Is there relational stench? A little spiritual BO? Woo! Maybe a little bit of that spiritual in your life? A little bit of stench? Could the Lord be asking you to deal with your stench such that the aroma of Jesus could shine through your life? You know, Dr. Henry Cloud and John Townsend have written a book called Safe People. Safe People. It's a simple message, how to find relationships that are good for you. And more often than not, here are some of the phrases that are often used to describe relational problems. When I saw these, I was like, I'm going to share that with everybody because I've heard it so many times. So many times. Here are those phrases. These phrases that reference a kind of relational stench in our life. He doesn't listen to me. I've heard that one a lot. She is so perfect that she can't understand my struggles. He seems so distant that I feel alone. She always tries to control me. He makes promises but really doesn't follow through. He is condemning and judgmental. She is always angry at me for something I did or didn't do. I tend to be my worst self with him or her. I cannot trust him or her. Those are painful words spoken by hurting people when they attempt to describe their present relationships. And when people say that about you, your family, or any group, it gets really, really, really smelly. You know, Townsend and Cloud have a section in their book where they talk about safe churches. Safe churches. I want this ark to be a safe church. Amen? It's safe. You're safe here. You're given plenty of room to work out the spiritual life. You're given plenty of room to process the mistakes, the shortcomings. Plenty of room to figure out. It's not a little bit of water over a long period of time. It's a lot of water over a little bit of time, right? Plenty of room to figure it out. Got to have it. Okay? And they have identified for us what a church body looks and feels like when it has a lot less stench and a much more beautiful aroma of Christ. Do you know what they said? Listen to me. It's very insightful. Number one, in a safe church, grace is preached as the foundation for how people are to be treated. Religion says change and you can join us. Christ says follow me and you'll change. Thank you, Adam Tomlinson, for the quote. Follow me and you'll change. And even if you don't follow him, we'll love you anyway. How about that? We'll love you anyway. Truth is clearly taught without shaming people in a safe church. Quickly, church leaders are real with their weaknesses, and they're not insulated from confrontation or challenge. In a safe church, small groups are vibrant and alive. In a safe church, there's a focus on God's forgiveness, not self-righteous performance. In a safe church, the church is networked in the community, open to receiving input from other churches or organizations to help meet needs. They're not looking to exclude everyone. They're looking to include and partner. In a safe church, the teaching is theological, it's biblical, well-founded. It is also practical and horizontal with a focus on how you treat other people. It's not just right beliefs, it is a right behavior. The messages are given with the understanding and the assumption that brokenness and struggle are normal parts of life. And in a safe church, it's a church churches that are safe recognize that allowing others to serve through a variety of ministries, even though they're not maybe professionals or experts or perfect in an area, it keeps things fresh and growing in a safe church. See, I want us to be a church where there's more aroma of Jesus and less stench. And I think the beauty of the gospel helps us get there. Well, what about individually? That's corporately. What about individually? And we need to wrap it. Well, individually, you'll see in your YouVersion app, are there some little things that you can do to make a big difference? Are there some little things you can do to have less stench and more aroma of Jesus in your life? Quickly. Give with no strings attached. Noah was a giver. Somebody bought all that lumber. He was a giver. Use your skills to help other people or creatures, right? Volunteer in a worthy cause that you feel strongly about. Write notes of gratitude to those who have touched you in some way. You want to do a little thing to make a big difference. One of the first things Noah did after that ark thing and the flood thing was he sacrificed. He said thank you to God. Share gestures of common courtesy on an everyday basis. Smile, hold a door, pay attention, get their plate. Mentor a younger protege in life skills or your family. I'm quickly going. Support local businesses who serve the community. All the lumber yards love Noah, right? Recycle or reuse things. Identify needs in your community or your city and address them. Stay attentive as you raise your family and raise a good family, a family that understands it's not just a little bit of water over a long period of time. It's a lot of water and a little bit of time. Walk with God. Ignore your age. Noah lived to be about 950 when he entered the ark. He was 600 when he got married. Or when he got married, he was 500. He entered the ark at 600. Age is just a number. It means nothing. Ignore the words, it's never been done before. Take care of getting or providing food for a meal. That's a blessing. Forgive somebody. It's an act of grace. It sets people free. It's an aroma of Christ. And so this morning, we did get through it. We're going to move on. Into Genesis, that is. There'll be other things, maybe related. But where are you at this morning? Is the aroma of Jesus seeping out of your life? Is it more stenchy? More smelly? And what about the bigger picture? Where are you there? You see, I tell people all the time, don't follow Jesus because I do. Don't follow Jesus because somebody else does in your life. Follow Jesus because it's true. The story is true. You know, I'm closing with this. When there's no loving authority in our lives, we get lost. The story of male elephants in South Africa's national parks teaches all we really need to know about authority. In the 1990s, officials at the Kruger National Park Game Reserve were faced with a growing elephant problem. They had too many elephants, and this was throwing the entire ecosystem off. And they transplanted some of the elephants to the Pilanesberg National Park Game Reserve. It was underpopulated with elephants. And due to the enormous size of the elephants, it was much easier to transport the smaller, not the larger, more mature bull elephants. And so after only a short period of time, the rangers at Pilanesberg National Park had a new problem with the new transplants. They started finding dead bodies of endangered white rhinoceroses in the park. They suspected that it was poachers, but the horns were left intact. There was no bullet wounds, and the rhinos had been killed violently with deep puncture wounds. And they set up hidden cameras, and they found out that these younger elephants, trying to be all macho, were killing the rhinos. The theory was that these younger male elephants were wanting to mate, but the females knew instinctively that they weren't ready to mate and be daddies, and so they wouldn't allow it. And the female elephants will only mate with the largest and strongest bull elephants, and so these frustrated young males vented their anger on the rhinos, and they tried to exterminate two of the ringleaders, but as soon as they were gone, a couple of younger elephants would rise up and start playing the bullying role again. And finally, the rangers had a breakthrough. They brought in some huge male elephants as old as 40 years of age. The largest name was Amarula. Good elephant name. Amarula was approached right away by one of these young bully elephants. Big male, 40 years of age. Amarula gave him a thrust to his stomach that was so hard, it lifted that younger bully male up off the ground, set him back down. The ranger said overnight, the problem went away and order was restored. There was no more senseless killing in the park because authority was on the scene and in charge. And the bizarre and violent behavior of juvenile elephants stopped immediately. You know what? There's a loving ruler over our world. And when He's in charge, it's the only way we can survive. And there are times when things like a flood have to happen to check us, to wake us up to a new reality, a new presence, a new power, a new story. Will you pray with me? Father, thank you so much for this day. We've covered a lot of ground. My goodness. A lot of thoughts here, a lot of possibilities here, a lot of intriguing viewpoints here. But most importantly, Father, I ask and pray that we would be a safe church. That Stones Hill Community Church would be a place of safety. People could walk into this place and feel the safety of the group, the presence of your grace, your love, the commitment to your undying truth. And then I ask and pray, not just corporately this morning, but I pray individually that if our lives have gotten a little smelly, maybe in an attitude or relationship, you would check us on that. We would be reminded of who we are, and we know the storm is great, and we know it's unpredictable, and we see the storm on the horizon, we see what's happening culturally, we understand it's a very, very scary world out there. It's a very scary world where we actually are starting to pay attention where we sit in restaurants because we're not sure who's going to come in the door. When we walk down a mall lobby, and we have to keep our eyes open and very careful because quick movements are made for various reasons. When we wonder who's going to pull out the next gun, it's getting very, very scary in our world. And I pray you would help Stones Hill Community Church to be one of the safest places in the world for people to come and know your love and your grace. And then I ask and pray here this morning, again individually, would you help us to love and be the aroma of Jesus? And would you help us to love Him so much that we want to honor Him in every way we can possible? And be so bold for Him that we live out the story behind the story when university professors tell us we're silly. That we'll be brave and courageous to quietly live out the Jesus story no matter. Because you're God. You've spoken. And we can be changed. So if anybody here needs Jesus this morning, right now, that they'd open up their heart, say yes to the story behind the story, and be redeemed, saved, in the ark, on their way to heaven. In Jesus' name, amen. Would you stand with me? You hung with me. Thank you. Praise God for that. That's why somebody asked me this week, are you happy, Joey? Are you happy? I'm happy. Why? You listen to me. Praise God. Make me really happy. Do what I've asked you to do for the glory of God. And make me really, really happy. Pray for me that I'll do it too. Okay? Have a great day. You're dismissed.